I used to hitchhike. Not out of necessity but by choice. A deliberate rebellion against the safe, predictable path my parents had planned for me. There was something intoxicating about standing on the shoulder of a highway with my thumb extended, not knowing who might stop or where I might end up by nightfall. This was before smartphones tracked our every movement, before ride-sharing apps and instant background checks. It was the summer after I graduated from Westlake University with a degree my heart wasn't in. While my former classmates pursued internships and graduate programs, I pursued the horizon, carrying little more than a worn backpack and a spiral notebook filled with observations of the people who picked me up. I had rules, of course. I wasn't reckless. I trusted my instincts, avoided isolated areas after dark, and always texted my roommate Carla the license plate of any vehicle I entered. I carried pepper spray in an accessible pocket and kept a Swiss Army knife in my boot. These precautions had served me well across 14 states and approximately 8,000 miles of American asphalt. Until Route 16 in western Arizona. The Sonoran Desert in mid-September still holds the summer's heat, releasing it slowly as the sun descends. I had been waiting on the roadside for nearly 2 hours, watching the sky transition from harsh azure to the soft lavender of approaching dusk. Traffic had been sparse, mostly commercial trucks that regulations prevented from taking on passengers, and tourists in rental cars who viewed a lone hitchhiker with thinly veiled suspicion. I was beginning to consider setting up camp in the scrubland a safe distance from the highway when I saw headlights approaching from the east. The vehicle slowed as it neared my position, and I straightened, adjusting my backpack and attempting to look trustworthy. The car, a dark sedan, American-made but not new, pulled onto the gravel shoulder about 20 feet ahead of me. I approached cautiously, bending slightly to peer through the passenger window. The interior light was off, making it difficult to see the driver clearly in the fading daylight. He leaned across the seat to roll down the window manually. The car was older than I'd initially thought. "Where you headed?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that matched his appearance. A man in his 50s, thin with graying hair receding from a lined forehead. He had the weathered complexion of someone who spent significant time outdoors, and his hands on the steering wheel were calloused, the nails trimmed short. "West Haven if you're going that direction," I replied. "Or anywhere along the way." He nodded. "I can take you as far as the junction to Silverdale. That's about 40 miles west of here." "That would be great, thank you." I reached for the door handle, then paused. "I'm Maya, by the way." "Francis," he said simply, not offering a last name. I sent Carla a quick text with the license plate number, make and model of the car before sliding into the passenger seat. The interior smelled of coffee and something else, a faint medicinal odor I couldn't quite place. The dashboard was clean but worn, the upholstery faded from years of desert sun. A small wooden cross hung from the rearview mirror, swinging gently as Francis accelerated back onto the highway. The first 10 minutes passed in silence. This wasn't unusual. Many drivers picked up hitchhikers for company but needed time to assess whether they wanted conversation. I gazed out the window at the desert landscape, watching shadows lengthen across the red earth as the sun descended toward the horizon. "You do this often?" Francis finally asked, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Hitchhiking. Often enough," I said. "I'm writing a book about American highway culture. The people you meet, the stories you hear when you travel this way, they're different from what you'd encounter on a planned trip." He nodded thoughtfully. "People used to travel like this all the time. Nowadays, everyone's too afraid of strangers." "Sometimes with good reason," I acknowledged. "But most people are decent if you give them a chance." "Most," he agreed with an emphasis that raised the hair on my arms. As we continued west, the daylight faded more rapidly than I'd expected. Francis switched on the headlights but didn't engage the interior light, leaving his face increasingly shadowed. I reached for my phone, pretending to check messages while actually ensuring I still had service. 1 bar, weak but present. That's when I noticed the large box in the back seat. It was partially covered by a dark blanket, but in the glow of my phone screen, I could make out its dimensions, about 3 feet long and 2 feet high. Large enough to hold. What? Camping equipment, perhaps. Tools. Groceries. Or something else entirely. I wouldn't have thought much of it, except for Francis's reaction when he noticed my attention. "Just some supplies," he said tersely, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "For a job." I nodded, not wanting to seem suspicious. "What kind of work do you do?" "This and that. Mostly maintenance. Fixing things people don't want to fix themselves." His knuckles whitened slightly on the steering wheel. "People throw away too much these days. Things that could be salvaged." Something in his tone made me uneasy. I returned my phone to my pocket and shifted slightly closer to the door, checking that it was unlocked. "What about you?" he asked. "Besides writing about hitchhiking." "I studied anthropology," I said. "Cultural observation. I'm taking a year to travel before starting graduate school." The lie came easily. I'd found that mentioning future plans and academic connections made drivers less likely to view me as untethered, disposable. We lapsed into silence again. The desert night had fully descended now, the highway marked only by our headlights and the occasional reflective post. Stars emerged overhead, brilliant in the clear air. Under different circumstances, I might have found the isolation beautiful. A faint sound from the back seat broke the quiet, a muffled thump as if something had shifted inside the box. I froze, my eyes straight ahead, my mind racing. It could have been anything, a loose item settling as we rounded a curve. The sound of the road beneath the tires. My imagination heightened by isolation and growing unease. Then I heard it again. Distinct. Deliberate. A dull impact against the inside of the box. Francis's reaction was immediate. He reached for the radio, turning it on and raising the volume. Hard rock blared from the speakers, drowning out any other sounds from the back seat. "Gets lonely out here without some noise," he said, his voice casual but his eyes now flicking repeatedly to the rearview mirror. I forced a smile. "Sure." My mind cataloged possibilities with detached precision, as if I were analyzing a case study rather than living it. The box could contain an animal, a dog or cat being transported. But why not mention it? Why the secrecy, the sudden loud music? The alternative was too disturbing to contemplate directly, but I couldn't dismiss it. Something, or someone, was in that box. And whatever it was alive and conscious enough to make deliberate noise. I needed to get out of the car. "No. Actually," I said, keeping my voice steady with effort, "would you mind stopping at the next rest area? I'm feeling a little carsick." I patted my stomach apologetically. "The winding road, you know?" Francis frowned. "No rest areas for another 30 miles. You can roll down the window if you need air." I nodded, turning the crank to lower the window halfway. The desert air rushed in, cool and clarifying. I drew a deep breath, trying to think. We were on an isolated stretch of highway, no other vehicles in sight. Jumping from a moving car at this speed would likely result in serious injury. "Should pass soon," Francis said, watching me with a new intensity. "Carsickness usually does." I nodded again, desperately searching for options. My backpack was at my feet. Could I use something in it as a weapon if necessary? My pepper spray was in my jacket pocket, but reaching for it now might telegraph my intentions. Another thump from the box, louder this time. Unmistakable. Francis swerved slightly, then corrected the car's path. His composure slipped momentarily, revealing something cold and calculating in his expression. "What's in the box, Francis?" I asked quietly, the question escaping before I could stop it. He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice had changed, harder, no longer maintaining the facade of normality. "Nothing that concerns you," he said. "Nothing you need to worry about." "I think I heard something move," I persisted, watching his reaction carefully. His jaw tightened. "Road noise. That's all." "I'd like you to pull over, please," I said, no longer hiding my fear. "I'll get out here." Francis laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Middle of nowhere? That wouldn't be safe for a young woman. I couldn't let you do that." His right hand moved from the steering wheel, reaching toward the center console. I tensed, preparing to defend myself, but he merely adjusted the radio volume higher. "Just relax," he said. "We're almost to the junction." The implication was clear. Once we reached our destination, whatever it was, I would join whatever was in that box. I made my decision in an instant, driven by instinct and adrenaline. My hand moved to the door handle and I braced my feet against the floor. "What are you doing?" Francis demanded, reaching across to grab my arm. I twisted away, yanked the door handle and pushed with all my strength. The door flew open, desert air rushing in with cyclonic force. Francis shouted something I couldn't hear. Above the wind and engine noise. His hand clamped onto my jacket, but the fabric tore as I hurled myself from the moving vehicle. The impact was violent and disorienting. I tucked and rolled as I'd learned in a self-defense class years earlier, but nothing could fully prepare me for the trauma of meeting asphalt at 40 miles per hour. Pain exploded across my left side as I tumbled over the rough surface, skin tearing, bones jarring with each revolution. When I finally came to a stop, face down on the gravel shoulder, my body was a symphony of agony. But I was alive, and I was free. I pushed myself to my hands and knees, head spinning, and looked up to see the sedan's brake lights flare red in the distance. It had pulled over, perhaps a quarter-mile ahead. Terror gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. I staggered to my feet and ran, not toward the highway where Francis might find me, but into the desert, away from the road. The moonlight provided just enough illumination to avoid the larger cacti and rocks as I fled, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I heard the car door slam, then Francis's voice calling through the night, "You're making a mistake. It's not safe out there." I ran faster, ignoring the warm wetness soaking my torn jeans, blood from road rash and deeper cuts I couldn't yet assess. The desert terrain grew more challenging as I moved away from the highway, but fear propelled me forward until Francis's calls faded into the night. Only when I could no longer see the highway did I allow myself to stop, collapsing behind a large boulder. My phone had survived the fall, still in my pocket. With shaking hands I called 911. The Arizona State Police found me 2 hours later, guided by the GPS coordinates from my phone. By then Francis and his car were long gone. I told them everything, the box, the sounds, my desperate escape. They took my statement with professional detachment that suggested this wasn't the first such report they'd received. "You did the right thing," Trooper Vasquez told me as the paramedics treated my injuries. "Trusting your instincts probably saved your life." 3 days later, while recovering in a West Haven hospital, I learned that a car matching Francis's had been found abandoned near the California border. Inside the trunk, not the back seat where I'd seen it, was a large box containing women's clothing, duct tape, plastic restraints, and syringes. No sign of Francis himself. 6 months later, human remains were discovered in a remote area 50 miles from where I'd jumped from his car. Dental records identified them as belonging to Elise Harmon, a 22-year-old who had gone missing while hiking in Colorado the previous year. I never learned if Francis was eventually caught, or if he claimed more victims after me. I don't hitchhike anymore. Sometimes I wonder about what, or who, was making those sounds in the box. Had I heard another victim? Someone who had been trying to warn me? Or had Francis placed something there deliberately, a psychological trick to gauge my reactions before deciding my fate? I'll never know. But I carry the lesson with me always. Trust the warning signals your mind sends you especially when, you can't fully articulate the danger. Sometimes the difference between a chilling story and a tragedy is nothing more than the willingness to jump. In Blackridge Forest, 4 college students, Devin, Zoe, Mateo, and Nina, sought escape from the crushing pressure of final exams week at Cedarwood University. The wilderness called with promises of fresh air and open horizons, a stark contrast to the suffocating library air and endless textbooks that had become their prison. Blackridge has these amazing hiking trails, Devin enthused as they piled gear into his Subaru on that crisp October morning. "My dad used to take me there. The views along Coldwater Creek are insane with the leaves changing." Mid-October offered that perfect balance, cool enough for comfortable hiking but warm enough to ward off the bite of approaching winter. The sky stretched endlessly blue as they reached the trailhead around 10, the gravel parking lot only half filled despite perfect conditions. The first few hours unfolded exactly as they'd hoped. The trail meandered alongside the creek, which tumbled over moss-covered rocks and miniature waterfalls. Towering oaks and maples formed a canopy overhead, their leaves a tapestry of amber, crimson, and gold. Nina stopped frequently to photograph particularly striking scenes for her portfolio. They lost track of time, hypnotized by the rhythm of footsteps and water over stone. Lunch passed in a clearing beside the creek, conversation flowing easily, the stress of exams becoming a distant memory belonging to different people. None checked the time until the quality of light began to change, golden afternoon sun taking on the amber hue of approaching evening. "We should head back," Zoe suggested, gathering their trash. "It'll be dark in a couple hours." Mateo checked his phone. "Battery's at 20%, but the map shows we've gone almost 4 miles from the trailhead." "That can't be right," Devin frowned. "I didn't think we'd gone more than 3 miles tops." An hour later nothing looked familiar. The trail, clearly marked earlier, now faded in and out, sometimes disappearing entirely before reappearing yards away. The creek was no longer visible or audible. As darkness fell, they admitted they were thoroughly lost. They gathered fallen branches and built a small fire, working methodically to combat the fear threatening to overwhelm rational thought. That's when they heard it, footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps crunching through underbrush somewhere beyond their firelight. They froze, eyes meeting across the flames. Devin gripped a sturdy branch like a weapon. "Hello." Zoe called, voice wavering. Is someone there? We're lost hikers. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was more unnerving than the sound had been. No insects chirping, no leaves rustling, nothing but the soft pop and crackle of their small fire. None slept much that night. The footsteps returned before dawn, circling their camp at a distance, moving with the deliberate pace of something that wanted them to know it was there. As morning light filtered through trees, they set off to find higher ground. The footsteps followed, matching their pace, remaining just far enough away to be unseen. No matter how they changed direction or speed, the presence maintained its distance with uncanny precision. Hey! Devin shouted suddenly. We know you're out there. Who are you? His challenge echoed through trees until fading into silence. No response came. By mid-morning they crested a small ridge. Through a narrow break in the canopy about half a mile west, something angular and gray was visible, definitely man-made. Following a game trail down the hillside, they discovered an old hunting cabin, weathered cedar planks darkened by years of exposure, a small porch with a single rocking chair, windows clouded with dust. It looked abandoned, but the absence of encroaching vegetation suggested otherwise. Before anyone could suggest checking inside, the cabin door swung open. The man who emerged was tall and lean, dressed in forest green canvas pants and a plaid wool shirt. His face was heavily lined, weathered by sun and wind, framed by iron-gray hair that fell to his shoulders. Something in his posture suggested danger even before he spoke. You're on private property, he said, his voice surprisingly soft for his imposing presence. We're sorry, Devin replied quickly. We got lost on Coldwater Trail yesterday. The man's pale blue eyes, almost colorless in the morning light, studied each face with unsettling intensity. A faint smile played at the corners of his mouth. Coldwater Trail? That's more than 8 miles from here. You've wandered far off course. When they asked for directions, his smile widened, revealing teeth too white and even for someone living in isolation. No phone service out here. But I can help you find your way. He gestured toward the cabin door. Come and rest. I'll draw you a map. Alarm bells rang in Nina's mind. There was something wrong about this man, about his convenient appearance, about the practiced ease of his offer. We don't want to impose, she said, stepping backward. Nonsense, he insisted, tone hardening. You look exhausted. His gaze moved past them, scanning the forest edge. These woods can be dangerous for the unprepared. All manner of predators about. In that moment, Nina became certain. This man had been following them, circling their camp in darkness, herding them toward his cabin. Thank you, but we should keep moving while we have daylight, Devin said, edging away. The man's expression changed, the veneer of hospitality falling away like a shed skin. I insist, he said, menace unmistakable now. He moved with unexpected speed, descending the steps in a fluid motion that brought him between the group and the forest path. Something metallic glinted in his hand, a hunting knife catching the dappled sunlight. You misunderstand the situation, he said almost regretfully. This isn't an invitation you can decline. The realization struck simultaneously. They weren't lost hikers who had stumbled upon a cabin. They were prey that had been deliberately led to a trap. Mateo reacted first, grabbing a fallen branch and swinging it in a wide arc. Run, he shouted. They scattered in different directions. Nina plunged through dense undergrowth, branches whipping across her face. Behind her, the man's voice rose in anger. It makes no difference. These are my woods. You can't escape. She ran blindly until the ground disappeared beneath her feet. She tumbled down a steep slope, coming to an abrupt stop against a boulder. Pain blossomed across her right side and ankle. Dragging herself behind the boulder, she discovered nearby snares, steel cable traps designed to catch animals by the leg. More appeared throughout the ravine, strategically placed. This wasn't just a chase, it was a systematic hunt. The man knew these woods intimately and had prepared for exactly this scenario. How many other lost hikers had he lured or driven to his cabin over the years? Hours later, her friends found her. They discovered a path leading downhill and sent an emergency text when Mateo briefly got reception. As dusk approached, they spotted tripwires across the path, further proof the hunter had anticipated their every move. When rangers' flashlights finally appeared ahead, relief overwhelmed them. Then a shotgun blast shattered the moment. Rangers drew weapons, ordering them down. In the chaos, Nina caught a final glimpse of their pursuer at the light's edge. His pale eyes reflected the beams like an animal's, his expression conveying a silent promise. Another time. When I took the night security job at abandoned iron gate mill, I was desperate for the above-average wages. The listing was suspiciously vague. Night security. Iron gate mill. $19 per hour. Must work alone. No experience necessary. In hindsight, I should have questioned why the position remained vacant for 3 months. Built in 1923, the textile factory later produced munitions during World War II before returning to fabric production. When manufacturing moved overseas in the 1990s, Iron Gate closed, leaving behind 80,000 square feet of brick, steel, and forgotten machinery. Harrison Properties maintained it minimally while awaiting higher land values. My orientation with Mr. Davenport lasted barely 30 minutes, a perfunctory walkthrough of a labyrinthine structure. Your shift is 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., he explained briskly. Rounds every 2 hours. Check all entrance points. If you find something amiss, note it. Don't engage with trespassers. Call police. The security office near the main entrance contained a desk, a cracked vinyl chair, a mini fridge, and monitors showing grainy feeds from exterior cameras. They work most of the time, Davenport emphasized, the implication hanging uncomfortably. After he left, I discovered the logbook in the desk drawer. No guard had lasted more than 2 months. Their entries started detailed and methodical, then grew increasingly brief and sporadic. The final guard, Marcus, had written only "all quiet" for his last 7 shifts before abruptly disappearing from the record without explanation. My first nights passed uneventfully. The emptiness was profound, not just absence of people, but the vacuum left by decades of human activity suddenly ceased. Machines stood like prehistoric skeletons, relics of an extinct industrial species. On the 3rd night, movement caught my eye on a monitor, the Eastern employee entrance slowly swinging closed. I distinctly remembered checking it, turning the deadbolt, tugging the handle to ensure it was secure. When I investigated, the door was locked as I'd left it. No signs of forced entry, no footprints beyond my own in the gravel pathway. Similar anomalies multiplied. Lights I'd turned off would be on when I passed again. A chair in the executive office would face the window rather than the desk. The heavy fire door separating production floor from warehouse section would stand open when I specifically remembered closing it. I began keeping a private log and setting traps, threads across doorways, paper clips balanced on handles, dust patterns marked with my fingerprint. Time and again, my traps were disturbed, but never when watching, never captured on the limited security cameras. 3 weeks in, checking the basement level, I heard a maintenance cart squeaking over uneven concrete. The sound echoed through the space, impossible to pinpoint. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. "Hello?" I called, my voice thin and ineffectual. "This is security. Identify yourself." As I strained to hear, the temperature plummeted. My breath clouded before me, arms prickling with goosebumps. Something moved in the darkness ahead. Not a person, but a disturbance in the air, like heat rising from asphalt. I raised my camera instinctively and took 3 photos. When my vision cleared from the flash, the disturbance was gone, and temperature was returning to normal. The 3rd image froze my blood. Standing at the corridor's end was a figure in what appeared to be vintage factory worker's uniform, its proportions subtly wrong. Where facial features should have been, there was only a dark smudge like a thumbprint on a camera lens. Incidents escalated over the next month. Footsteps followed mine with slight delay. Distant machinery clattered from floors empty for decades. Voices murmured just below comprehension. Maintenance tools arranged themselves in patterns, chairs positioned in circles, a typewriter typing random keys untouched. The security cameras finally provided undeniable evidence. Footage showing the main production floor at 3:17 a.m. when I was elsewhere. At 3:19, a figure walked into frame, a man in overalls and cloth cap, moving with purpose across the floor. Unlike the blurred apparition in my photograph, this one was solid, clearly defined. He stopped in the center, surveying the space as if remembering how it once looked, filled with workers and machinery. Then he turned directly to the camera. His eyes were dark hollows, his face gaunt but distinctly human. He raised one hand, beckoning, then pointed downward before the footage dissolved into static. I consulted the building plans again. In the center of the production floor, where the entity had pointed, original 1923 plans indicated a large drain, part of a system channeling away industrial waste, sealed during 1960s renovations. With a sledgehammer from a maintenance closet, I broke through concrete until exposing a large circular cover. The stench that emerged was immediate and overpowering, musty confined air mixed with something organic and deeply wrong. Below was a hidden chamber containing human bones, at least 3 distinct skeletons arranged in a bizarre pattern. In the center sat a small metal box etched with unrecognizable symbols that hurt my eyes. Inside was Edmund Carver's journal, Irongate's security chief from 1943 to 1946, documenting horrific secrets. During wartime production, the mill employed refugees and immigrants whose disappearances would raise few questions. Accidents were frequent but unreported. Workers who died were erased from records, their bodies disposed of through the drainage system, sealed away during renovations. One worker, Elias Kovac, survived a catastrophic accident, witnessed the killings and tried to reach authorities. He was captured, brought back and sealed alive beneath the production floor as punishment. That night, activity reached unprecedented levels. Machinery activated despite having no power. Every door opened and closed in rhythm. Temperature fluctuated wildly. For the first time, I heard distinct words rather than murmurs, a voice with heavy Eastern European accent repeating, "Tell them. Show them. Remember us." I gathered all evidence and called police. The investigation recovered 17 individuals from sealed chambers throughout the mill's drainage system. Most were identified through immigration records, finally given proper burials after 7 decades. Harrison Properties faced criminal charges for concealing similar evidence found during 1990s renovations. Irongate was designated a historical site, with plans for a memorial to honor those who died there. The phenomena ceased once the truth was revealed and victims acknowledged. Sometimes I wonder if I was specifically chosen or simply the first to listen. In the final security footage frame, just before static overtakes the image, Elias Kovac seems to transform. His hollow eyes filling in, his raised hand changing from beckoning to what might be interpreted as a wave goodbye. Working night shifts for Velocity Courier seemed perfect for balancing my community college schedule with earning enough to cover rent at the Pines apartment complex. The evening hours, 7 p.m. to 3 a.m., paid $18 per hour plus tips, significantly above average for work requiring no experience. "You sure about this, Connor?" my supervisor Jeanette asked while handing me my uniform. "Night routes can be unpredictable. Some addresses you'll want to be extra careful with." Her warning carried an undercurrent I failed to recognize. My first few weeks passed smoothly. I learned which apartment buildings had broken entry systems, which offices maintained vigilant security guards, which neighborhoods had dogs that announced my arrival with frenzied barking. I developed efficiency that let me complete routes with time to spare. My shift was nearly over one crisp September night when the final delivery appeared on my tablet. A package requiring signature, addressed to 1867 Westbrook Drive in Lakeview Heights, an affluent neighborhood that rarely received late deliveries. I pulled into the subdivision, passing through wrought iron gates that stood perpetually open despite the exclusive communities sign. The houses grew larger and more isolated as I drove deeper into the development. Number 1867 was at the very end, a sprawling ranch-style home partially hidden by mature oaks. No lights shone from within. I checked my watch, 2:37 a.m. I considered marking it for redelivery but remembered Jeanette's warning about customer complaints affecting corporate contracts. After ringing twice, I heard movement inside, shuffling footsteps approaching the door. A porch light flicked on, momentarily blinding me. The door opened just enough to reveal a sliver of a man's face, pale skin, bloodshot eyes, 2-day stubble. "Yeah." His voice was raspy as if I'd woken him. "Delivery for David Mercer," I said, consulting my tablet. "Needs a signature." He opened the door wider. I glimpsed the interior, sparsely furnished with moving boxes stacked against walls. He wore wrinkled khakis and a rolled-sleeve button-down, unusual attire for someone presumably sleeping. "That's me," he said, reaching for the package. "Been waiting for this." As he signed, I noticed his hands, calloused and strong, with a distinctive circular burn scar on his right wrist. Something about those hands triggered a primal warning signal in my mind. He glanced past me to the driveway. "You alone? No partner?" The question raised immediate red flags. "Just me," I replied, already stepping back. "Have a good night." "Wait." His voice sharpened. "I need help with something inside. Won't take but a minute." Warning bells clanged in my mind. "Sorry, company policy, no entering residences." His expression hardened. It wasn't a request. The door swung fully open, revealing a second man in the shadows behind, shorter but solidly built, with a shaved head and neck thick as a tree trunk. Something metallic glinted in his hand, a gun pointed casually in my direction. Inside, the first man said quietly. Now. Time slowed as I calculated options. Running, too slow. Shouting, neighbors too distant. Fighting, outmatched, one-armed. None promising. The interior was nothing like I'd expected from its manicured exterior. The living room contained only a folding table, 2 chairs, and a laptop. No decorations, no signs of actual habitation. The kitchen visible beyond had takeout containers scattered across counters. This wasn't a home, it was a temporary staging area. Mercer tore open the package I'd delivered. Inside was a small plastic case containing what appeared to be USB drives. Finally, he muttered, pocketing them before turning to me. Now, delivery boy, let's talk about your unfortunate timing. They zip-tied my wrists with brutal efficiency, the plastic biting into skin beyond necessary, a small cruelty hinting at larger ones to come. What followed was methodical rather than frenzied. They weren't enraged, they were sending a message. Fists connected with my ribs, stomach, occasionally my face, but never my throat or temples, nowhere potentially fatal. They wanted me hurt, frightened, but alive. Through the haze of pain, I caught fragments of their conversation. Should have waited until morning. Timeline moved up. Others arriving tomorrow? After what felt like hours but was probably minutes, they let me fall to the floor. I curled on my side, each breath sending spikes of agony through my ribs. My left eye was swelling shut, blood from a split lip filling my mouth with copper taste. Mercer crouched beside me, his face level with mine. Let me be perfectly clear about what happens next, he said calmly. You're going to leave here and forget this address exists. Forget what we look like. Forget this ever happened. He placed a hand on my shoulder, a parody of compassion. If you tell anyone at all, we will know. And we will visit your little apartment at Pine Ridge. Only that conversation won't end with you walking away. Understand? I nodded, unable to speak through pain and fear. They returned my wallet and keys but kept my phone. The drive home remains a blur, stopping once to vomit, running red lights, sobbing when adrenaline crashed. Days later, my phone arrived by mail, wiped to factory settings with a handwritten note. Smart choice. Keep it that way. I quit Velocity immediately. My final paycheck included an unexplained $500 cash bonus, hush money from someone who knew about that address. 3 months later, news broke. Mercer and Rich, actually Daniel Whitman and Richard Holt, were arrested for sophisticated identity theft. The packages I delivered contained stolen data for their operation. Days after the news, another package arrived containing a flash drive labeled insurance. Keep safe. Don't view contents. When I eventually viewed it on a disconnected laptop, I discovered financial records, client lists, and video recordings implicating politicians, police officers, and corporate executives in extensive corruption. I copied the drive, buried the original beneath a specific tree in Hartwell Park, and mailed the copy to a post office box under a false name. A week later, Detective Kimberly Reynolds interviewed me about Velocity's potential involvement in the identity theft ring. I revealed nothing about that night. Weeks after, she was placed on administrative leave. Velocity managers were arrested for conspiracy and racketeering. The company dissolved amid accusations of serving as a criminal front. I relocated to another state under a different name. My apartment is rented anonymously, my job pays cash, and I keep to myself. In my darkest moments, I question remaining silent, wonder how many others were victimized by my inaction. But then I remember Whitman's words and the calculated violence behind them. The physical wounds healed. But certain damages leave different scars, invisible but permanent, altering how you navigate existence. I no longer trust easily. I verify everything. I maintain escape routes. I check my rearview mirror compulsively. Sometimes, nightmares return me to that sparsely furnished living room. But in dreams, Mercer leans close and whispers, "It doesn't matter if you stay silent. We know where to find you. We always will." I wake gasping, drenched in sweat, reaching for the weapon beside my bed that I pray never becomes necessary. 3 years have passed. Trials concluded with lengthy sentences, the criminal enterprise officially dismantled. I should feel safe. But somewhere in Hartwell Park, beneath an ancient oak's roots, evidence waits, proof that what was dismantled was merely one branch of something larger, something that might eventually remember the delivery driver who saw too much on a September night at 1867 Westbrook Drive. I remain vigilant. I remain apart. I remain silent. Because silence, I learned at great cost, is sometimes the only currency that purchases another day of life.